Hello, hello. It's another Women Talking Wellness. Women Talking Wellness, and it is the Breakfast Club edition if you're here in the UK, or is it more coffee morning? Have we had breakfast by now? I'm not sure. But we are coming to you alive and loud on a cold and windy and just bloody miserable Wednesday morning. But as always, there is a boatload of sunshine in today's chat. So, wherever you're joining us from today, whether it is Breakfast Club or Bedtime Snuggles, you are so welcome at our table. Now, let me take a moment to speak to those of you that might be watching on the replay. Don't forget to say hi in the comments, type replay, and let me know you're watching. As always, I invite you to share some of your takeaways, maybe something that gut punches you today, something that perhaps feels like a bit of a wake up call from this conversation, or maybe in the next hour, you might just hear something that inspires you to live a little differently. Whatever it is, share, share, share it all. So, who is my fantastic woman talking wellness today? Well, she's a yoga teacher. In fact, she was my first yoga teacher when many years ago I went to a tiny island in Thailand to study yoga teacher training. She was one of my first mentors, and she's been an inspiration ever since. She's an author, a speaker, and she works pretty tirelessly to empower others to embrace the true nature of themselves and to learn to live their dreams. That's quite a big statement, isn't it? Today, we're going to be talking about the mind body connection. We're going to be discussing the power of practicing acceptance and not allowing yourself to be defined by your body, your practice, or the limitations of other people, or indeed the limitations you impose on yourself. My guest today understands what it means to deal with adversity, to have your life thrown into turmoil at the snap of a finger. And she's proven time and time again that you are not your circumstances, you're not your past. And just because your circumstances change, maybe you no longer fit into the vision that you once had for yourself. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn how to use your body or live your life in a different way. So I would love you to give a warm welcome, give her some love in the comments, send us some thumbs up. Please welcome Zoe Trenwith to the conversation. Hi, Zoe.
Hi, Abby. Lovely to be here, and thank you for a very beautiful welcome and
My
very humbled and
pleasure.
honored.
My pleasure. Now, I did say a few moments ago that we're bringing you some sunshine today. Zoe is literally bringing us some
Yes.
sunshine.
Beautiful sunset here in old Adelaide, Australia. So,
It's just I feel like I'm
very
looking at
beautiful.
both of our screens just now, and I feel a bit like the Snow Queen with my sort of white and grey background, and you're sitting there all sort of orange and
Golden
sunshiny.
glow.
So let's just dive straight into this, Zoe. The reason that you came to yoga, I think, is a very, very powerful thing, and I would love you to share your story with the people who are joining us today. If you would tell us how you got to this yoga business.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Just quickly before we do start, it is NAIDOC Week here in Australia, which is a week where we celebrate the history and culture and the achievements of our Indigenous people, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And I do just want to take a moment to acknowledge that where I am speaking to you from is the traditional owners are the Kaurna people. So I just want to take a moment to honour and recognise the
Thank
land
you.
that I am currently on. So,
And
but yeah,
they
so
are beautiful lands. I
thank you.
haven't been to Adelaide for must be more than 20 years since I was last there, but it is
Wow.
still an experience that I've remembered for a long, long time. It's still very,
Yeah,
very powerful in my memory.
yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. I'm very, very blessed to be here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I came into yoga. I suffered a fairly serious car accident. It'll be about 20 years ago next year. And through my rehab journey, I'd been rear-ended by a small truck, and I was working retail at the time. And after the accident, and I pretty much spent months just lying in bed. It would take me 10 minutes just to walk from lounge to the bathroom, and I'd have to lay down for 2 hours afterwards because I'd be exhausted and in pain. And went to physios, chiros, was doing Pilates, and all of those things were amazing and certainly helped a lot. I've had 3 shoulder surgeries, I've had knee surgery, screws in the ankle, and about 3 years after the accident, and this is going back 17 years now, before yoga was really
A
popular, I
thing.
suddenly a thing, yes. And I don't, to be honest with you, I don't even remember where I heard this from, but I just remember hearing yoga was good for your back, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And a couple of weeks later, I went to my first yoga class and just absolutely loved it. For the first time in, over 3 years, I felt like I could trust my body again. And I felt empowered. I felt like I could move from being in this space where for so long I had been, debilitated, not only physically, but mentally, by all of the stories that I was being told by my doctors. You'll never be able to do this again. You'll never be able to go surfing again. You'll never be able to go horse riding again. You'll never be able to work full time. You'll never, all these things I wasn't going to be able to do. And living in the story of the rehab and the surgeries, and then the rehab again, and then the next surgery and the rehab again, and with 8 occupational therapists and everything, to go into that yoga class and feel, as I said, like I just felt like I could trust my body again. And I felt like that is the first time that had happened in, over 3 years since the car accident. And yeah, it was huge. It was a big moment for me. And I was so excited. I went back to another class later in that week, but with a different teacher, and I absolutely hated it. And I was so like, what? I was like, what is this? But I was like, no, go back. So I went back with the original teacher and loved it. And it was just, that other teacher at the time wasn't what I needed. It wasn't what I resonated with. And yeah, that was kind of it, really. I started practicing pretty consistently, and yeah, it really has kind of changed my life. Not just the physical aspect, but the mind, body, and the mental connection as well.
At what point
Yeah.
did you realize that you wanted to not only practice yoga but to share it and teach it to others?
Well, I'd been going through, as I was just saying, going through my rehab journey, and I had this occupational therapist pretty early on in after the car accident. I think it was about 3 or 4 months after the car accident that I was going into the gym and, doing rehab with and everything. And I remember at one point in that journey, her sort of saying to me, oh, you should maybe consider doing this sort of work. And didn't really, like, I kind of like, oh, yeah, whatever. Didn't really take it on board. And then about a year or two later, when I was going to the gym and my personal trainer, and again, this was after, more rehab and things like that, and the personal trainer said a similar thing. He goes, oh, maybe you should think about doing some of this sort of work. And so that was in my mind more. And at that point, that was when I started to find yoga as well. And so I was in Sydney, living and working there, and working in retail. And then I moved back to Adelaide, and I remember, and it's funny, I didn't actually remember this until a few years later, but my yoga teacher that I had in Sydney, when I left to move back to Adelaide, I was sort of saying to him, oh, what am I going to do? What do I do with, this practice? And he said, oh, go and get, the BKS Iyengar book and do the practices from the book, which like didn't work for me because I don't learn from a book well, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
And he actually said to me, he goes, and maybe in a couple of years you'll be a teacher. And as I said, I didn't even really remember that until, a few years later. And after I'd moved back to Adelaide, I went into my studies to do personal training and had thought of being occupational therapist, and then decided I'll do personal training first, because did I want to go and study for years at uni? No, I didn't, turns out. Yeah, and then I think that was kind of like the first spark. And then I came back to Adelaide and was doing my personal training, and because I wanted to help people, like what I had gone through, I wanted to help others as well. And then that pretty quickly translated into the yoga side of things, when yoga became more and more part of my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You talked a little bit a few minutes ago about the just the sort of incessant message that you received when you first had the accident about all the things that you will never be able to do. And I think that
Yes.
leads in very nicely to the importance of this mind body connection. And I think for a lot of people watching, they might have heard this terminology, they might even have read a little bit about it, but I think
Yep.
for most it's still a bit of a kind of slightly woo woo concept, something that maybe isn't fully understood. Can you expand on
Yes.
that a little bit and maybe put that into terms that might be more readily understood by the mainstream masses?
Absolutely. Well, I think the thing is, really is that little saying of, we are what we believe. So, what the stories that we are telling ourselves, and the way that we interpret those stories is going to have a huge impact on what we believe we're actually capable of. So, to be honest with you, when everything was happening, like I got depressed. I, did fall into that victim mode of feeling sorry for myself, and I was just lucky enough to have some people around me, um, my yoga teachers in the end, and my occupational therapist, my personal trainer, my brother even, who was a chiropractor, who sort of started to pull me out of that. Like I did get sucked into that. The woe is me. Oh, is this my life now? Starting to believe all of the things that the doctors were telling me. And as I said, when I went to that first yoga class, and I was just like, oh, I could really start to learn to trust my body again. And I went to kept going back to classes, and I was doing these things that I didn't, you know, think was really possible, but I just didn't think about it because it was so new to me, like this yoga practice, so different to the other things that we would and how we would normally be moving our body, that it didn't even enter my mind that I couldn't do it. And I was doing these things that, I didn't really think would be possible. But I didn't think at that time that they wouldn't be possible. I was just doing them. I didn't realize how hard they were or how challenging they were. And it pretty quickly, when we sort of come into this yoga practice, and it's this connection to breath, it's this space of really being able to sit with actually what is. So I would go into the yoga class, and each pose, each breath, you're just there with yourself, with your body as it is that day, rather than being there with the stories of what you're telling yourself about what is possible, what you're actually capable of. So I think it's really important to be able to have this space to actually just be. And so often we're not living in what actually is, we're living in the stories that we tell ourselves about what is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just if you are joining us today, my guest is Zoe Trenwith, and we're talking about the power of yoga in adversity, how this practice can help you to deal with the curveballs that life tends to throw out, and learning how to navigate your way through change all the way to acceptance. Now, if you do have any questions for Zoe, please do drop them in the comments so that I can share them with her. And of course, say hi and let us know what you're thinking, because we love you to join the conversation. Thank you so much, as always, for being part of this really special Women Talking Wellness Breakfast Club. I've got my extra green smoothie to keep me going today. So we're just talking about the mind body connection and the importance of, as Zoe just said a few minutes ago, just taking that pause and being in that moment. But I think it's really challenging in our modern world in particular to know how
Absolutely.
to actually accept who you are in that moment, because we're always trying to be something else, or we think we need to be something else, right? Social media tells us that we need to be something else. Advertising tells us we need to be something
Absolutely.
else. And Zoe and I were chatting before we went live today, and I was telling her, I think I actually shared this story last week when I was speaking to Megan Gilroy. Um, I'm teaching balance with yoga wheel right now, and as I just said to Zoe, truly regretting it. My balance is appalling. Wondering whatever possessed me to want to teach that for the next 6 weeks. But last week in class, I had like the biggest wobble and just fell out of a pose because my balance just wasn't. I think more than anything, my mind was on the next thing that was coming. Very good example of not being fully present. And it took all the energy that I had in me to not edit out that wobble when I uploaded the video to the membership. Because the part of my brain was going, but you're not perfect, Lorna. You can't let people see that you're not perfect. Well, of course I'm not perfect. And of course people know I'm not perfect, but in my mind it was a really, really challenging thing. And I think we see that just in all aspects of life right now. So how do we start living in the moment, loving who we are, regardless of whether we can do that really cool back bend or, our skin is perfect or whatever? How do we actually bring this into our real life? There's a big question for a
Wow,
Wednesday
yeah.
morning, right?
What a question. Wow. Um, the thing is that we put so much pressure on ourselves, right? To and we are so bombarded in everyday life with all of the things that we should be doing, all the things that whether it's in advertising and even in the yoga practice nowadays, like going into classes and being stimulated by classes at the moment. It's a little bit of a different situation here in Australia than elsewhere, but we get so overstimulated and we don't actually learn how to actually be with ourselves. We have music playing. We have I've recently just got in a new car because my old car broke down and my old car didn't have a radio. So there, like whenever I was driving around, I was just being with myself unless I was listening to a podcast or something. And then suddenly, like I'm driving around and there's this noise there, and quite often I just turn it off, because we're so used to learning to distract ourselves and learning to find entertainment or things outside of ourselves to make us feel a little bit more comfortable. Because the reality is, to learn how to be with ourselves can be a little bit uncomfortable. And we need to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable. And learning how to just be with each moment as it is, learning to just be with the breath without the need to fill it up with something else or without the need to distract ourselves. When we can learn to do that, my teacher, Clive, he sort of talks about the uninvited guests of the mind. And we so often just live in that stuff. And what we really need to learn to be able to do is just to take a moment to breathe, to learn to not be in such a rush to be filling ourselves up with the things and with doing, and allow ourselves to just be. And really all it is to take a deep breath, just one deep breath. That's all it takes. And the more and more you do that, the easier and easier it is going to be to come back to that space of centeredness within yourself, where all the noise goes away, and you can learn to actually just be who you really are, and be okay with whatever is arising in each moment. And that's what the practice of acceptance really is about, is learning to be okay with whatever is. We can, in yoga, we talk about abhyasa and vairagya, which is like practice and attachment. So we can take actions, but the results of those actions are not under our control. And learning that we can continually just it is just about to continue to practice, keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing. And the practice can be just the breath, the practice can be a full yoga practice, but to keep practicing. And for me, I remember one yoga class where this is where it really changed for me, to realize that it wasn't just about a physical practice. It was a little bit more was kind of going on. And I went into this class and I was so confused about a situation in my life that I didn't know what to do about. And I went into this practice, and after 90 minutes of just practicing, teacher calling the class, no music or anything like that, just other people around, just being with your breath, being with your body. And I came out of that class with absolute clarity about what to do. And that's the beauty of the practice, really, for me, anyway.
Yeah. It's it sounds when you say it like that, I think and again maybe people watching can confirm this for me, but you listen to that and you go, yeah, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to do. But the reality of it is so damn hard.
Yeah, and
It's so
absolutely.
hard to shut out the noise, to be with yourself.
Yes.
The I often find myself saying to people, especially when I'm teaching on a one-to-one basis, when when you can actually sit with yourself and allow the
Absolutely.
thoughts to arise, allow the sensations to arise and not run away from them, that's
Yes.
that's when change really happens. But it is so
Yeah.
incredibly uncomfortable to be silent, because this stuff that's going on in your head, we never really let that
Yes.
bubble up, and it starts to come up,
We
and
don't
you're
give it
like,
space.
wow.
Yeah. I didn't know that was there.
Yeah, how do I turn this off now?
Yeah. Where we've given it the space to kind of like show up, right?
Yeah.
And that can be really scary.
Yeah.
Um, and so often we just kind of keep filling that space up with other things
Oh yeah,
because
like
to
Netflix,
look at that stuff can be
Facebook,
really confronting.
um,
That's right. Yeah,
conversations with people, filling your
absolutely.
social calendar, never
Yes,
actually having. I know
that's it.
so many people at the moment, as well. I was actually talking to a couple of clients recently, and they were saying that they can't fall asleep at night without having, like the radio on. They take their phone to bed and
Yes,
put it under
yeah,
their pillows, so there's still
yes,
noise even when
yeah,
they're
yeah,
trying to sleep. There is no room for silence,
yeah.
and this
That's
is
right. Yeah.
so detrimental to our well-being on every level.
Absolutely, absolutely. And look, I mean, there is a time and space for that to be okay for sure. And definitely, with the situation in the world that we're in right now, sometimes it is like we just need to, Netflix and chill. And it's absolutely fine. Absolutely fine to be doing that. But where we need to kind of find that balance is, are we using that as a way to escape,
Yeah.
to distract ourselves, as a practice of avoidance, as
Mm.
opposed to being able to, you know, for me, you know, I start my day with my morning meditation. I take my dog for a walk down the beach. I go for a swim. And, even in the middle of winter, I will still swim. And everyone down the beach, like, they all think I'm crazy. But for me, that is the space where I connect. So for me, it's like I notice the days when I don't do that. So those days where I haven't had that capacity to do that, or if I'm rushing through things, I
Mm.
notice that throughout the rest of the day.
Mm.
So I think we all need to find, and so that's what works for me. And everyone has to find the different things that kind of work for them. I say it with my private clients and things like that as well. It's like, well, it's not for me to tell you what is going
Mm.
to work for you.
Mm.
You've got to find those things that work for you. What are the things that help you connect? What are those things that give you the space
Yeah.
that you can allow yourself to just be and connect to nature, or whatever it may be that works for you?
Mm. When you first had your accident, you said that you had uh, kind of sunk into a place where you were struggling to get motivated, to look after yourself, to
Absolutely,
do the things that you knew
absolutely,
potentially could help you. What would you say
yes,
to people who are in that place right now? Because I think that is one of the greatest challenges. We might know the things that are going to potentially make us feel better, give us more energy, move us
yeah.
forward in life. But some days, just finding the energy to do that
It's
one
hard.
thing is just,
Yes.
it just feels, it's like you're moving through mud.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I mean, yeah, I fully went you know, into a deep state, and that, a few years later, it was actually when I was doing my teacher training in Byron Bay, and uh, I got taken out of the yoga class in an ambulance. Like, and that was pretty intense, and my neck flared up massively again, And it did. I spiraled a little bit again, because I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, is this what life is going to be like? Is this what it's going to be? Is this, I'm going to be living with this pain, and I'm going to be living with these limitations. And I kind of had to remind myself that I'd been there before, and things had changed. And, in yoga, we talk about anicca, impermanence. So that's what it is. Like, things change. And just even in, and that's where the other beauty of the practice comes in. And that's where the poses come into play as well. Like, we're in that yoga pose, and it's uncomfortable. And, we want to get out of it, or our mind or our body is resisting to it. But when we can learn to be in that space of discomfort and allow ourselves to find a little bit of peace there, that's where the beauty of the practice comes in. And then we take those lessons that we learn on the mat and take it into our daily life. So when we're in those moments where things are really hard and it feels really overwhelming, and I've been going through some stuff recently where that can certainly come into my mind. But for me, because I've been there before, I know that it changes, and I know that I have the capacity to be able to make a choice. So I can continue to sit in that mode and nothing's going to change, or I can allow myself to really kind of shift my perspective, to kind of ask myself, how can I use this? What is this here to teach? Because the thing is, like, life happens for us, not to us. And so when we can learn to live from that space of life happening for us, we can learn to ask ourselves the questions every single time. What is this here to teach? How can I use this? Instead of being a victim to it, I can learn to shift it and become a master of it. I can learn to use it to help me to elevate and grow. Now, in those moments when things are really challenging and tough, it can be really, like, in the intensity of that moment, it can be really hard to see that. Things can get a little bit foggy, a little bit unfocused. And all it is just keep going back to the practice. So for me, it's like those days when, and this is where, discipline comes in a little bit as well. For me, it's like discipline and faith, tapas and strata. And the faith that if I just keep going back to my practice, the things will evolve, things change. And the faith in knowing that everything does change anyway. Because, and I remember a few years ago, I was in Tibet, and I was doing this trek. And it had taken us 4 days to drive to get to this trek, to trek around Mount Kailash, which is one of the holiest mountains in the world. And the day before the trek, and I was there for this massive festival, one of the biggest festivals of the year in the Hindu calendar. And I got gastro, like bad gastro. And we're on the mountain in the middle of nowhere. It's minus 10 degrees, freezing cold. And the first day of walking wasn't too bad. It was about 6 or 8 hours of walking, and I'd taken some Imodium, so things like that. And the next day of walking, we were looking at having to walk for anywhere between 8 to 12 hours. And walking over this pass, which is like 5,600 meters, so we're in altitude and everything as well. And an hour into this walk, the gastro started again. And I was like, oh man, I was feeling horrendous. There's thousands of people, there's yaks, there's people on horses, there's dogs that we've got to be mindful of, because being in Tibet, they're used to the air burials, and they can tend to bite people and things like that. Anyway, I have to try and find a little area to do some business and eventually start walking. And the reality is, like, I was feeling horrendous. I was feeling horrible. But, I had a choice. It's like, I'm either going to be walking 8 hours backwards or 8 hours forwards. So either way, I'm going to keep walking. And either way, and I remember, and I remember having this thought in my head at the time. It's like, man, this is like the hardest thing that's ever happened. And this thought came back in straight away. No, it's not. A car accident, and you got through that. And if you got through that, you can get through anything.
Yeah.
And when we don't have a choice, that is when we really kind of find out who we really are. And so often, we give up before the transformation happens,
Mm.
right? Before the change happens, before things shift or it gets a little bit hard. And as I said, like, you know, then we kept walking, and at the end of the day, me and the group that I was sitting with, and we were all like absolutely knackered throughout the walk. And this is hard, this is hard, this is hard. Half hour after sitting down and having a little break, we are like, could do that again. And it's like when you look back on those moments, you made it through.
Mm.
And I think that that's something
Yeah.
to really remind ourselves of,
Mm.
is that our capacity is more than we actually give ourselves credit for. And remembering that, things change. And if things don't change, we have the capacity to shift our perspective around what is happening.
Mm.
Right? So the things that we can, so if we cannot change a situation, we can change our perspective around the situation.
Mm.
To see the opportunity, to see the possibility rather than to see the obstacle.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I love I think the words that are going to stay with me today for sure when you just said there, I'm either walking 8 hours backwards or 8 hours forwards, but either way, you're walking. I think that just kind of like in a nutshell, it just brings
Yeah.
yeah, that is my philosophy for life this week. Either way, I'm still walking.
Either way, I'm walking. Yep.
But it's having I don't know about you, and I'm actually really interested in finding out how your own practice and your own sort of perspective on yoga's changed. I know certainly for me, when you and I first met on that tiny island all
Good
those years
while.
ago, I was a very different person than I am
Oh,
now. And
yeah.
the kind of metamorphosis, I wouldn't even say it's an evolution. I mean, it was a complete, like, just melt me down and pour me into a completely different mold. I really have changed over the last sort of 12 years.
Yes.
And it's been sort of wonderful and challenging and horrible sometimes, but like everything that's happened to me and throughout my life has brought me to the place where I am now. And I
Absolutely.
I think what I've realized myself, and what I wonder if it's lacking for people these days, is the word is resilience. Because like you
Absolutely.
say, in your head you said, oh, on this mountain in Tibet, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. You nearly
Yeah.
fucking died in a car accident, love. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened to you, right? you
Absolutely.
know and I had the same, I had the kind of same thought when you and I met. I had just lost my businesses, my home, my relationship, everything that I
Yeah,
kind of
I
valued
remember.
to that
Yep.
point in my life. I just like disappeared.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
whatever I was dealing with, I was feeling an intense sense of loneliness when we were on that island. I was feeling an intense sense of
Yep.
inadequacy. Everybody, what was there, like 30 women on that course, and everyone just
Yeah.
seemed like
Yeah.
an
I think
absolute
so.
freaking Amazon. I mean, like, they were incredibly powerful women, and I just felt like such an imposter in that group.
Mm.
um and everything that was kind of going through my mind at that time was like, oh, I'm really struggling to do this yoga teacher thing, but hang on, I survived losing everything, so maybe I can get through this. And
Absolutely.
then the next thing would come along, and I'd be like, oh, this is a really hard
Yeah.
part of my life, and then I go, no, hang on.
Yeah.
But
That's right.
resilience is something that I don't know if we've got a little bit soft as human beings. We've got a little bit sort of like, we expect everything. How do we
Yeah.
regain our resilience?
Well, I mean,
I'm really, I just
it's
love it.
like
I am asking you all the really easy questions this morning. Can we
yeah, I
can
know.
we
It's like,
just could we solve world poverty while we're at it, and maybe
yeah. yeah, just easy.
Right. So
Oh,
let's find some resilience. How are we doing that?
yeah. For me, it's we have been so conditioned to make ourselves comfortable, right? So we we haven't, for a lot of us, um, this idea of discomfort uh, is really challenging, right? And I've had people say to me, my yoga classes are too hard or whatever. Look, I'm not going to lie, my yoga classes can be challenging, but I also work with a lot of people that have quite significant injuries or situations that have happened in their life, or disabilities, and I work with people who want to do handstands and the fun stuff as well. And the for me, it's not about what you can do in the class, it's how you show up, right? So, and I'm not going to lie, the discomfort in the physical practice can be there, and I do it on purpose sometimes, because if you allow yourself to be challenged in the yoga room, and I've had someone walk out of class and goes, oh, that was a hard class, and but did you die? And they're like, no. But you did it, you made it through.
Yeah.
So what, yeah, it was hard, it was challenging. It's like I said, it wasn't hard. Like, change that language. It was challenging, it was uncomfortable, but you made it through. And we have to learn to be okay with discomfort. We've been so uh, and cotton balling ourselves so that we don't have to deal with discomfort. And don't get me wrong, there is a huge difference between discomfort and pain. And pain is an opportunity for us to pay attention, whether it's physical pain, mental pain, or emotional pain. It's a signal for us to pay attention.
Yeah.
And we need to learn to be with discomfort without running away from it, without hiding from it. And when we can learn to sit in those moments of discomfort, and to learn to kind of, again, those questions for me is, the resilience comes in, is how can I use this? Instead of letting it use me, how can I use this? How can, I talk about gratitude a lot as well. Like, the car accident was, the worst thing and best thing that ever happened to me. Like, I'm so grateful for it. And other things that have happened to me in my life, I'm so grateful for those things happening, because I am the person that I am today because of those things. And I wouldn't be the teacher that I am without having the car accident. Like, I went through everything that I went through, and it has given me so much passion to help others who have been in pain or been taught, as I said, the people that I work with some pretty amazing people. You want to talk about resilience, you should see some of them. Like, amazing. What I've been through is nothing, and I'm just so inspired by their journeys as well. And that the resilience is really about the capacity to be able to kind of sit in those moments of discomfort, be able to ask yourself the question is, how can I use this? What is this here to teach me? And then to allow yourself to have those moments of gratitude as well. Like, gratitude is a huge practice. Like, even in everything that is happening in this world right now, like, how can we be grateful for these moments where we get to pause, which wouldn't be happening otherwise, So there's lessons to be learned in everything, and that's where the resilience comes
in. Yeah,
the
no,
capacity to be able to just keep getting up,
yeah,
day after day.
yeah, yeah. And it's sort of having that strength of will, isn't it, to know that you've said it a number of times this morning. Everything changes. And this is a lesson that I must confess is something that I I have learned the hard way.
Yeah.
Definitely. Um,
Yeah,
but it's a lesson that I find very empowering, and I think oftentimes this idea that everything changes can be viewed as a bit of a negative thing. You know, if
yeah,
you're living a comfortable life, you're making some money, you're maybe in a relationship that feels really good, knowing in your mind that that could all change tomorrow might feel like quite a negative thing. But, well, yeah, surely that just makes you appreciate what you have all the more while you have it, in that moment.
absolutely.
Love it,
Absolutely.
embrace it, enjoy it. And yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so it changes. Well, that's fine. It moves on to the next thing. But with the same token, when you're sad, when you're hurting, when you're struggling in life, that's not going
Mm.
to last forever either. And
No, absolutely.
to me, that is, that's a massive lesson to take on
Yeah.
board. And I think yoga, for me personally, teaches that, illustrates that in a very powerful way, especially with the kind of
Absolutely.
yoga that I tend to teach now is more yin yoga than anything else.
Yeah.
So sitting in those poses that are just disgustingly uncomfortable when you first get into them, and feeling, your body resisting, and your mind is just
Yes.
going, oh, how much longer am I going to hold this pose, to gradually sort of
Absolutely.
sliding into, it's not that bad, could stay here a little bit
Yeah.
longer, to,
Absolutely.
if it, eventually getting to a point where you're like, "Oh, it's all right,
Not so bad.
I might
Yeah.
do this again tomorrow."
I think the yoga, and as I've been extremely blessed to have some amazing teachers in my life. And one of the big things that, they have taught me and the yoga practice has taught me is the capacity to respond. So we have this tendency to react, right? And I
Yeah.
talk about this a lot in my classes. Like, give yourself the space to take a breath, and instead of unconsciously react, to be able to take that moment to pause and consciously respond.
Mm.
And I think that is a huge thing, to be able to have that capacity, that when things get challenging, when things get, uncomfortable, rather than react to the situation either with avoidance or fight or flight, that we can allow ourselves to take that pause, that moment to pause and consciously respond. And that's been a huge thing for me. When I was younger, as a teenager, I was very reactive. I was, very fiery. um, and to the point, like, even my family, they said, like, you don't react anymore. And they said this like years ago, in very early on into my yoga journey. And they was like, that's how they knew for me, like, that the practice was changing,
Yeah.
was shifting. And for me, like, that was huge for them to be able to. I was feeling it myself internally, but
Mm.
for
For
the
someone
people
to
that have
see
known me
that
my whole
outside of
life,
you, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah. And I think, the thing is, we need to remind ourselves as well, with whatever is arising, whatever is occurring in our lives, we have this tendency to, push the uncomfortable things away. We talk about desire and aversion, raja and devesha, like the things that we love, the things that we enjoy, the things that are comfortable, we pull towards us more, and the things that are a little bit uncomfortable, or things that we don't want, we push away.
Mm.
And the yoga practice has really taught me to not do that. Really, like, because the thing, if we talk about suffering, dukkha, and this is kind of what we're talking a little bit about. We create more suffering for ourselves when we move towards desire or move away with aversion, because the reality of life is that it's not always comfortable. We're not
Yeah.
always going to get what we want. We're going to be faced with situations and circumstances that are really uncomfortable, and the things that we don't want. And as long as we're judging these things as good or bad, as the
Yeah.
things that we love and the things that we don't love,
Mm.
then we're going to really create a lot of division and suffering for ourselves. This practice has really shown me how to, to be okay with whatever is arising. Is like, no matter the external circumstances, I have the power to adjust and control my internal experience.
Mhm.
And I have the capacity to choose what meaning I am giving something. Early this year, I had, a round of injections in my knee again. And before that, my knee was really sore, had the injections worked really well, my knee was getting better, I was back to doing, some long walks and things like that. And then randomly one day on the beach, my, foot sunk down in the sand, my knee snapped, and then knee was not so happy again.
Yeah.
And the capacity to be okay regardless, like, okay, well, this is it now. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was good, and now it's not so good.
Yeah.
But that's my physical body.
Mm.
My mental, emotional body can be okay regardless, because I have the capacity to, and we all do, we all have that capacity to choose what
Mhm.
meaning are we going to create, what story am I going to tell myself.
Mhm. Mhm. I think in the current climate, as you said earlier, we're living through. Someone said to me recently, actually, I think this is quite fun. At some point, future generations are going to look back and say, "Wow, you lived through the time of COVID," like the Great
Yeah,
Depression or something like that. Like
it was,
we're we're going to be that
and that's like what
generation where
we
people
look
go,
back at this.
"Wow,
Yeah.
you lived during COVID." Um, but most of us are going through stuff right now, whether it be you don't know whether you have a job, you don't know if you're going to be able to pay your mortgage, pay your
Absolutely.
rent, put food on the table.
Yes.
This
Yep.
is adversity and discomfort beyond the realms of
Yeah.
what people like you and I would normally deal with. And
Absolutely.
I can understand that there is some resistance. What you're saying just makes perfect sense to me. It just resonates on such a level. But I imagine there are people who are watching this saying,
Well, that's
what
easy to say.
good is coming out of me, not having a job? What good is coming out of me? Maybe
Absolutely.
maybe they've lost someone because of this. Maybe,
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
I'm sure with the greatest respect, there are people watching this going, what bollocks is this
Yeah.
woman talking
Oh,
about? Clearly
and
she's
it's
got no
very easy to,
problems.
yeah, and it's very easy to say that. It's really easy to be able to say that, but that's not my reality. And I think that that's it.
Exactly.
That's really, important thing. And the only reason that I can say these things is because of the practice that I've done, and because I've been
Right.
blessed with having some amazing teachers that have shown me, and given me the tools. And it's like I said, it's my yoga practice, it's my meditation, and I'm not talking about just when I talk about yoga, just the physical asana practice. I'm talking
Yeah.
my meditation practice. I'm talking my pranayama practice. I'm talking about the self study and the inquiry.
Mm,
And
mm.
one thing that is really important is to be able to actually really step back and acknowledge things. There is so much shame and blame around in our world, right?
Mm.
And I remember it was actually on the retreat in Thailand, and I won't go into the full story, but I remember. Uh, do you remember the little girl that
Uh-huh.
was?
Yeah.
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 So I remember hearing her saying one day she was walking back up the hill late at night. She was sort of saying like, "Oh, like I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted. Can we just come up here a little bit earlier in the night so I'm not having to walk up this big hill late at night?" And she was just exhausted. And the response from the adult in that situation was like, "Oh, what do you have to complain about? Like, people over in Africa have to walk for hours a day just to get water." And I was like, well, that wasn't really helpful. And that's not really going to be something that is really like that just has no correlation to what this little girl is feeling in this moment right here right now.
Right.
And I think that that's really important, is that we can allow ourselves to judge and compare ourselves to others and kind of go like, oh, I don't, why am I like, I've got nothing to feel bad about, or I've got nothing to worry about, or whatever. Or we feel shame about our situation or whatever is happening for us. And we all have stuff,
Mm.
and there is no level or comparison, because what we are going through is what we are going through, and we need to acknowledge and own that, and have no shame around that, and no shame around our feelings around it, to be able to really sit there and acknowledge it rather than push it away, or go like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling bad. I think that that's a really important thing, is to be able to actually let go of the shame and let go of the blame, and be able to sit in whatever is, and allow ourselves to acknowledge what is happening. Because only by acknowledging it, by acknowledging the struggles that we're going through, by acknowledging the feelings that we have, can we have the capacity to shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
There's a big
And
difference between acknowledging and wallowing, isn't there?
exactly, that's right. And as my teacher says, is like, don't get don't get sucked into the stories of the mind. So you acknowledge the story as it arises, you acknowledge what is arising, you acknowledge whatever is happening, but
Mm.
don't get sucked into the story of it.
Mm.
And whatever is happening, for me, the practice of gratitude has been really huge, and it can be as simple as, I opened my eyes today. I you know I sit out on my balcony in the morning. It's like, I'm so grateful for my hearing, that I can hear these birds chirping.
Mm.
I can, I remember having someone say a little while ago, it's like, I'm grateful for this bill that I have to pay, because it means I have a roof over my head.
Yeah.
And I think when you can kind of, for me, the practice of gratitude can be a really useful tool. So in those moments when we're really struggling and a lot of things are happening, whatever it is, whatever story is happening for you, can you find those little moments of things to be grateful for?
Mm. Mm. There is
Um,
an instance, I think, certainly in recent years, where I think gratitude and sort of positive mindset has actually become a little bit toxic in some ways, because
Absolutely, absolutely.
it's like, well, what am I not allowed to feel bad? Am I not allowed to feel stressed or worried or whatever?
Yes,
Well, yeah, of course you are, because
exactly.
everything's valid. And
Yeah,
I think that's a very important
yeah,
part. Just because you practice gratitude doesn't mean that
yeah.
you don't have a bad day. Doesn't mean that you don't feel,
No, no,
worried, stressed, tired,
that's
whatever.
right. Exactly, exactly. You can be, there's, the little, like, the whole thing of like, let's just feel good and let's be positive and stuff. And I think that's not reality. That's not life.
Yeah.
And I think that can be really harmful and really dangerous. And I've seen
Mm.
it so much in the yoga world, and even in yoga classes, like, oh, let's just make people feel good. Let's give people an escape from their lives. And it's like, well, how about we actually give them some tools to help them deal with life, as
Yeah.
opposed to just escape from life.
Hmm.
Um, and I think, for me, there's this real balance of being able to really sit with what is,
Mm.
and to be able to ask yourself the question of, okay, what can I change? Can I do anything about this?
Mm.
And if I can't do anything about this, can I at least change my perspective around it?
Yeah. 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 I love
So
it.
when we're in lockdown,
Mm.
okay, I can't change the fact that I'm in lockdown, but how can I change my perspective around the fact that I'm in lockdown, so
Hmm.
that I can, have a capacity to use it a little bit more,
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than be
Yeah.
fighting against it so much.
Yeah. Zoe, we're almost out of time.
Yeah.
Can you believe? It just goes so fast.
It does, doesn't it?
Is there one thing, if you were to share just one thing today with the people who are watching, that has maybe made the greatest change, or the most sort of significant impact on you, what one thing would that be?
I think it really is that what I said earlier is like, life happens for us, not to us.
Mm.
And for me, regardless of what I have been going through, whatever has happened in my life, and Doesn't mean that it's always easy,
Mm.
but I always come back to how can I use this?
Yeah. Yeah,
What is this
it's
here to
it's a
teach me?
great question.
How can I learn? What can I evolve? And to have patience
Yeah.
with those answers.
Yeah. To have patience with yourself.
Patience with yourself.
Yeah, is such an
Exactly. Patience with
important thing.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it is that time again. Our time is up, and I don't know about you, but that felt like, for me, a really great start to the day. Whatever time of the day
Thank
you
you.
are tuning in, I think there's definitely been something for everyone in this conversation. There's definitely a few things that I've taken away from this that I'm just so grateful to be reminded of. At this point, I want to say a massive thank you to Zoe for giving us her time and sharing her personal experience as well as her absolutely vast wealth of knowledge about the body, the mind, and how mighty we humans really are. As some of you know, we're currently combining the wisdom of the chakras with our yoga practice in the regular Tuesday evening classes. Now, next week, we're going to be looking at the throat chakra, and it could not be more perfect because it ties in beautifully with my guest on Women Talking Wellness next week. I'm going to be talking to Charlotte McKechnie. She's a singer, a director, she's a creative entrepreneur, and she's going to be teaching us a little bit about how to use your voice. Not just how to use your voice to speak, but to truly speak your truth, how to use it to balance energy and to step into your own indomitable strength. It's going to be a really big one next week, I can tell you. So look out for the details on the Facebook page. And of course, I will be sending an email out to those of you that are on the list. Once again, I want to say I have so much gratitude for Zoe, and as always, so much gratitude for you for finding the time to tune in, to hang out, and to be part of these just wonderful conversations. So, that's all, folks, for today, and I can't wait to see you next week for another Women Talking Wellness.